Let's talk about another series that I believe we both had going 7. Same pick here, Minnesota in 7 over Phoenix. Game 1, though, was pretty decisive. It was kind of a beatdown. Minnesota won 120-95. What did you take away from this one?
I was just super impressed with how hard Minnesota made life on Phoenix all game long, man. Towards the end, third quarter, fourth quarter, we got some turnovers and passes in sets where I just thought Minnesota stifled Phoenix. They made life hard on D-Book. He goes 18 points, 2 boards, 5 assists on 5 of 16 shooting. And these are 3 shot creators, Beal, KD, and Book. I'll give KD his flowers. I mean, KD had such a great game. Gobert was just no match. And it really felt like, man, in any instance, it was like, man, if KD gets his spot, it's going in. KD made a lot of stuff look easy. But for 3 guys whose main preferred shots or pull-up mid-range shots, the Suns' shot diet is already inherently difficult. They're the number 1 in terms of mid-range frequency shooting team in basketball, as expected. And so you reach this question, it's like, so does Phoenix have the biggest counter to what Minnesota does because they protect the rim so well? And yeah, the answer is yes, if they're really on, but it's also like, this is already a really tough, these shots are, hard to make. So game to game, the shot variance there is always going to be hard. And when you have a team that has this many good perimeter defenders, it's like, you're just making those shots even tougher, where if your touch is off by just a little bit, it's even harder to generate offense. And so I just think Minnesota did a really good job of making it tough for Phoenix to find shots and stifling them in the half court. You read off that stat when we're leading up to this series, Carson, that this is the biggest gap between a number 1 and number 2 defense since the, 94 Knicks?
Yeah, I think that ended up moving down a little bit, but it was very close to the end of the season.
Yeah, and so, this is an elite Minnesota defense. And I thought all the guys, from Anthony Edwards to Jaden McDaniels to Cat to Gobert to Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who's an awesome perimeter defender, did a tremendous job on making life really hard on Phoenix. And then on the other side of this for Minnesota, Anthony Edwards is a stud, man. I think Anthony Edwards is just a gamer. I think he is built for these big moments. I don't always expect his jumper to be on, but I always expect Anthony Edwards to crank it up a notch. That guy he's bred for it. He is bred for the moment. He is, and it's not even like he believes his own bullshit. His bullshit's real. You know what I mean? Like he's not peddling.
And he believes it too.
Exactly. But he's not peddling you anything. It's all real. And so I expect Ant to come up for these big games, but I was blown away with him, man. The shot making, the athleticism, the way he playmaked in this game, 33 points, 9 boards, 6 assists. The thing I was really most impressed with was the footwork, man. The mid-range, the elbow, the turnarounds, the fadeaways, the Kobe-esque, just beautiful, beautiful work. I was impressed with Karl-Anthony Towns, man. He doesn't take a ton of shots in this game, but he does his job effectively well. And, I wonder if we just expected. Karl-Anthony Towns is supposed to be the unicorn. Infamously, he's the number 1 pick in all these teams to build around for the next, X amount of years, right? Cat might just be the dream number 2 guy where he's doing his job and he can hit these open shots. But I thought he held up physically well on defense. I thought on drives, he was a really great, helper. Thought he crashed the glass hard. I thought Cat just did his job well, but he wasn't passive and he wasn't fearing the moment. When he needed to step up, guess what? Cat did, and I was worried about that. And the big thing about Minnesota is they have these 2 guys that, I do believe in. I believe in Ant and Cat, but there's a significant depth difference to me between Minnesota and Phoenix. And that's ultimately why I chose Minnesota over Phoenix, is I liked their depth way more. I liked how impactful their role players could be. Naz Reid is a weapon to have out there on the floor at any given time. I said this in our series preview. Naz Reid is a 40% shooter from every area behind the arc. The guy is just water. If he puts up, he's just got great touch. If he is shooting a 3, it is a good shot. And considering how well this team collapses defenses and creates good looks for him, it's just easy. The fact that he is such a good closeout attacker. Nasri doesn't make sense. And it is so they're spoiled for being able to bring him off the bench. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, having a guy like that you can bring in and play defense and handle a little bit. And the one that blew my mind away was in transition when he's dribbling the ball up the court and he steps in to that left wing three. I don't know if people realize how hard of a shot that is, man. In transition, going full speed to plant your feet, just stop and pop that. That's a tough shot. And I just look up and down the roster of both of these teams, Carson, and I go, damn, man. I just don't trust other guys down the Suns roster. I just don't.
Go, damn.
I go, damn, man. I don't trust the other guys, the Grayson Allens, the Eric Gordons. I trust them to do their jobs and to hit shots sometimes, but in terms of well-rounded, all-around impact, the Timberwolves just have more guys. And I think there is such a heavy burden, too, on the Sun Stars to be so overwhelmingly great offensively and then exert themselves at an unreasonable, expectation on the other end. I think it's really hard to expect D-Book and Beal and KD to do all of this offensively and then to go defend Anthony Edwards on the other end, man. It's just tough. And so considering those factors, I'm pretty confident in Minnesota. Now, I don't think we're always going to get Anthony Edwards like this. I don't know if we're going to get Cat, every game like this, but Minnesota just has more guys that I trust down the roster. And that was the difference in me picking this series. And I thought that was, along with Ant, just big dog and everybody was the difference in this game.
This was a very decisive win, and you touched on a lot that I agree with there. Minnesota was just consistently a better basketball team throughout this regular season, but Phoenix had controlled the head-to-head matchups. They swept them. And I did have concerns about this matchups in terms of Minnesota's defense being as dominant as we're used to because of the fact that Phoenix is a team that is so predicated on skill and perimeter shot making and pull-up shooting, and having 4 guys who are all going to be lethal pure shooters when Grayson Allen is starting, 3 dudes who are very dangerous on-ball creators. Just the amount that Cat was going to have to guard in space, I was worried about, and I thought was going to be a key to this series. And then also, I wasn't as concerned about this, but just the fact that you have a team that doesn't have to consistently finish around the rim to be their most effective does to some extent diminish Rudy's absolutely monstrous impact. But it's if you can beat a team by just raining pull-up jumpers from 10 to 15 feet and you don't have to go at Gobert like other teams do, that is a potential matchup advantage. But the flip side of that, and why I ultimately went with Minnesota, is this is a team that is way bigger and stronger and more physical and a better defensive team than Phoenix. And I thought maybe they give up a little bit more than usual, but they are also going to get theirs more than usual because there's nobody on this team who can guard Ant, first of all. And they did a good job on him early in this one. They were hitting the exact pressure points that you want to with Anthony Edwards. They were saying, all right, we are going to send a second defender at you early. We are going to double and help hard, and we're going to force you to beat us as a passer, and we're going to force you to beat us as a pull-up shooter, and we're going to bait you into some of those tough, deep pull-up threes. And he took a couple early that I didn't love, and he had the 4 turnovers in the first quarter. That was the ideal game plan for them because they don't have a guy who in single coverage can stay in front of Ant and bother Ant. It has to be very much a collective effort. And he's not the most proven decision maker when we're talking about these offensive number ones. And although he put on a clinic today, he was one of the least efficient volume pull-up shooters in the league. But that third quarter was just ridiculous, man. It was the most electrifying performance of the day. 18 points and just an absolute clinic, as you mentioned, from the mid-range. And he was unconscious with the pull-up threes. And he just put that game to bed. You also hit on a key point, though, with the supporting cast, which is that when they did start trapping Ant, and they did that early in the game as well, but once it was all right, cool, this guy just isn't going to miss a pull-up jumper, the T-Wolves don't just have straight-up spot-up shooters. They have good spot-up shooters, but they have versatile offensive players. They have dudes who are comfortable putting the ball on the floor and then can also knock down shots. NAW, Jaden McDaniels had some nice takes in this game, working his way to the mid-range. Naz Reid is a very skilled ball handler for his size and good athlete. Mike Conley sucked in this one, but he also fits into that archetype. So Ant just stayed composed as the game went on, and he got the ball out to those guys, and now they're working with an advantage, and they could capitalize on it. felt different than Grayson Allen in this game, where it's sort of like if you close out hard, he's not as comfortable attacking those closeouts, putting the ball on the floor. And so you can make him a less effective player by running him off the 3-point line or just deterring those 3-point shots to begin with. So Minnesota's depth shined, Ant shined. But honestly, Logan, I think Karl-Anthony Towns is the most problematic matchup for the Suns. They have no one who can guard him. Like, Ant dominated this game. Ant was the best player in this game. But Ant dominated this game in a way that he doesn't normally dominate. Like, I love Anthony Edwards. I think everybody does. He's not normally going to make 60% of his pull-up jumpers. Cat, to me, was the guy who just consistently put Phoenix in positions where they were working at a disadvantage because they are this very slight team and their starting five is very small, honestly, outside of Yusuf Nurkic. And he was playing with the right mentality. That was one of my concerns. Talked about how he has to hold up guarding in space. And then the question is, will he give you back more than he gives up? Because they don't have anybody that can guard him in single coverage. But we've seen times where he isn't assertive enough or he's turning the ball over. We got good Cat in this one. He was physical. He was playing bully ball, couple strong finishes, and also just kept drawing fouls, like jostling for position. Whoever you are in single coverage, Kevin Durant, you can't let Cat get that deep position or that is going to be a bucket against you. So you foul him. And then when they doubled, he was so prepared for it. He wasn't overwhelmed. He wasn't caught off guard. He was dissecting them. He had that beautiful dump off over his head to a cutting Gobert early. He had that stretch in the second quarter where he drew a second defender from the perimeter, dotted up a cutter, and then made a beautiful pass to Ant later out of a designed action. He just had the perfect approach. He remained composed, only one turnover off a double team in this game. And then we kind of got deprived of the opportunity to watch Cat continue to dominate because of, frankly, bogus foul trouble. Nobody commits more offensive fouls than Cat. Most of them are justified, but there were two bad calls where Grayson Allen just slips, loses the ball. They call a foul on Cat. He just loses body control and he initiates the contact and then loses his balance. And then KD is literally like climbing on Cat's back and he does a little clear out. Are you not allowed to do a clear out when a guy's climbing on your back, man? I don't know. I thought those were both bad calls. And then that sent him to the bench, but they still had good options. And even if Cat is off the floor, then you have this like super versatile defensive lineup with a bunch of good wings who can shoot, and Ant carried the load. But honestly, going forward, I think he can be a real offensive focal point for them. That to me is like the most replicable great offenses. Give Cat the ball in the post because they have to double, or in single coverage, he's going to give him the business. It's just an automatic advantage. Last big dude for the Timberwolves who I want to give credit to, Logan, you didn't mention, Rudy Gobert was phenomenal in this game. I thought he handled switches very well. You mentioned like KD's shot making was just ridiculous. What can you do? Book had one absolutely absurdly difficult finish around the rim on a drive against Gobert. Like, even when dudes scored on him, those were tough shots. And then he deterred so many paint attempts in this game. And we talk about how Phoenix can survive not having to score at the rim better than just about any other offense, but they were only 12 of 27 from fewer than 10 feet in this game. Like, they really did not score in the interior. Gobert also dominated the glass, dictated the game there, and you felt like that entire advantage for Minnesota, right? Cat also gets some easy offensive boards because they just don't have anybody to physically match up with two guys of this size. They're so much bigger and stronger. They won the offensive glass battle 13-3. Overall, 52-28 on the glass. But offensively, I thought also Gobert was good. He was appropriately aggressive. He is a big target over the top who the Suns don't have an answer for, and Ant struggled to get some of those passes to him in traffic early, but Nurk can't contest a lob to Rudy Gobert. And he also, like, at a couple points, went after a mismatch, which I'm good with. He hit that ridiculous turnaround and won. You're not going to get that a lot, but it was a really good Gobert game. Like, Minnesota had by far 3 of the 4 best players on the court. And then they also had the significantly better depth, and their collective defense was awesome. It was a resounding win. And Ant isn't going to nail his pull-up jumpers like this going forward, not at this clip. Phoenix, I think, will shoot a little bit better, but there was a lot that was replicable for Minnesota in this game. And it did feel like they were just the better team that was dominating physically.
The most replicable thing during the rest of this series is how they dominated on the glass, Carson. And that's where I just really struggle to see if Phoenix is going to be able to come back from. You know, I think a lot of this preview about this series got caught up in regular season results, got caught up in, skilled shot making. And I'm not hating on Beal and KD and D Book, but it seemed like a lot of people's takes was Minnesota is going to get exposed. Gobert is going to, Gobert is going to get cooked and drop.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it all kind of that was the consensus, and lost in the shuffle was just how big and physical and nasty of a defensive team. And that's why I went with Minnesota. Is I like their identity more. When we boil these things down, you have to think, what is the identity of this team? How do they play basketball? And can they dictate and make other teams play their brand of basketball? Well, look, Phoenix is going to shoot better, like you said. Their guys are going to be on. D-Book is not going to have, I don't anticipate him being this bad. I expect their offense to reach a higher level. But the things that aren't going to change are Minnesota's defense and how much effort and intensity they're going to apply on Phoenix.
Yeah.
And how they're going to dominate the glass. Like, regardless of if they're on offensively, I think Minnesota can just muck this game up and bring Phoenix down enough where they can turn it into a grime fest where Minnesota's never really out of the game. Like, they are just so physically dominant and have such an advantage in that regard over Phoenix. Like, I think that's going to be the advantage that is hardest to overcome for Phoenix, is just the physical and size battle, that mismatch that they're going up against every single night, man.
And Minnesota was so good defensively in this game. I agree with you on the identity point, and I think that's a good one. And that's another thing. Like, we can devalue regular season basketball, apparently, except when it's the head-to-head matchup between these two teams. And we can focus on star power. There are truths to thinking that way in the modern NBA. Like, we're both guys who believed in the Lakers, of course, not to beat the Denver Nuggets, but to have a legit chance maybe about anybody else out west, because clearly they took their foot off the gas in stretches and they were playing their best basketball when it mattered. But Phoenix was a team that consistently was inconsistent. They were consistently inconsistent, like they really were. And there are just gaps in this roster construction, and there are gaps in terms of who's going to do the little things, who's going to get dirty here, who's going to get super physical. Like, Phoenix played more physically than they usually do in this game, but they can't out physical the Minnesota Timberwolves. It's not even close. And so they got bullied in those categories. It was like the ultimate skill ball versus bully ball matchup, and the bullies won out. And in physical playoff environments, that's not uncommon. It definitely matters that you have a guy who can get you a shot in the half court, but Minnesota has a couple of those guys ultimately, and Phoenix just isn't built to guard them. But Minnesota defensively was so good. First of all, they did not get put in rotation as much as they have in previous matchups. Like, they weren't really getting beaten off the bounce very consistently. They did a lot of good defense in single coverage, forcing Phoenix's stars into these pull-up jumpers, which they'll take, but it's better to have them take a mid-range pull-up that's reasonably contested than it is a wide-open catch-and-shoot three for any of these guys. And I thought they especially did an awesome job on Devin Booker. Book has to be way better. This was a bad Book game, and I am a Book fan. I love his game, but he just was a non-factor. KD had to do basically everything. They were physical with him at the point of attack. Gobert deterred him on several drives, and it just gets a little bit mucked up when you have Nurk down there, who's obviously not a floor spacer, but also isn't like this sort of vertical threat where you throw it up to him. So Gobert can play two on those drives somewhat easily. And he took a lot of tough shots and just didn't create a lot of good shots. And when Minnesota was in rotation, they were sharp, man. They were sharp there. Cat, I didn't think was great on the perimeter. I thought KD found some success against him when he got that matchup. He's still slower in space, right? But he played hard. He played really hard. He was closing out hard. He was rotating quickly as he can. And so ultimately, I thought, even though Minnesota's run occurred with him off the floor, that was just because Ant went nuclear. Like, Ant just wasn't playing very well when Cat was on the floor in this game. And all of a sudden, Ant was unstoppable when Cat was on the bench. And I liked them riding that lineup that was working, especially with Cat in foul trouble. But I think he's in for a really, really good series. I was excited about what I saw from him, but they can survive because they have Nas and they have so many good wings without him. For the Suns, do you have cause for optimism about anything? Like, what do you think will go better and maybe give them a chance going forward?
I mean, like you said, I don't think Devin Booker is going to play as poorly as he did in this one. The issue that I have with Phoenix really is just their process, man. There were a lot of drives where, I don't know, man, if Phoenix is in a rhythm, if there's not a go-to guy, they can just kind of play a little too quickly. Like there were back-to-back possessions in the second half where they throw balls away, easy turnovers to kind of sink this one. Minnesota gets easy buckets in transition. I think that I'm just trying to get downhill more if I'm Phoenix. That's what worked. You know what I mean? Like you said, so many things that happened in the regular season matchups didn't happen in this one, where they're getting the backside moving, where they're getting Gobert moving, where there just wasn't a lot of that, man. It was stagnant. It was, and the Suns are limited. I don't know. I think the physical mismatch here is so large. I'm not saying the Suns can't win a game. I do think the Suns win a game. I think they probably win 2. I'm taking,
Yeah.
At least
they're going to
2.
go nuclear. Katie and Book and Beal will go nuclear.
It's just got to happen. It's the law of probability, right? The law of averages. There's got to be a game or two where the Suns just do that. But the physical imposition that Minnesota can bring every night just doesn't change. You know what I mean? Your shot making varies every single night. That physical imposition that Minnesota brings to the game doesn't. And I just think Phoenix is a little too physically overwhelmed. Shout out Nurk. Nurk's a tank, man. And
Shout
Nurk's
out
gonna
Nurk
battle.
For what? He
Nurk's
got
gonna
dogged,
battle,
dude.
I mean,
Rudy outplayed him soundly, though.
That's what's tough, dude, is there's just not, like, Cat and Gobert on the floor together is a problem. Gobert and Naz Reid on the floor together is a problem. Naz Reid and Cat on the floor together is a problem. Like, the Suns just don't have anybody alongside Nurk that can help him do that and change. And so I think Phoenix consistently gets beat like that physically. So I guess the silver lining here is you're going to have a game or two where you are just nails on your pull-up jumpers, but I'm pretty confident in Minnesota because of their advantages that don't change game to game, that they're going to pull this thing out.
I'm with you. There's not a lot of positive takeaways for Phoenix from this one. Katie was phenomenal. You can't really ask him to be much better. And also the one thing that Minnesota did really well is because they mostly played him in single coverage. Like he didn't really create for his teammates a bunch. The one dude who does add a unique dynamic, and this is something we talked about, is Bradley Beal because of his quickness. And I felt he was able to actually penetrate the defense the most. Book will play better. He'll just knock down more of his pull-up jumpers. He's so ridiculous there. The Suns collectively will knock down more spot-up jumpers. But yeah, there were a lot of clear advantages for Minnesota in this game where outside of Ant's ridiculous pull-up shooting, it's like nothing unsustainable happened. Rudy's going to soundly outplay Nurk this entire series. They are going to be the much more physical team. They are much bigger and longer. They have more quality basketball players. You felt all of that in this game, and I'm going to bet on it. And I do just want to give one last shout out to Ant, dude, because some guys like just make the moment feel even more special with how they act during it. And Ant is the epitome of that. When he is jawing at KD, dude, after every bucket, that's what it's all about, man. Are you kidding me? It reminds me of when a kid, I was playing a tennis match and he was jeering at me. He was saying something and I told him to talk to me when his balls dropped. He was a very small kid with a squeaky little voice. That's sort of like Ant. I think we have a lot in common, me and Ant. And that was on display in this one. Unbelievable player, rising face of the league, consistently has delivered in these playoff environments. And by the way, consistently his pull-up jumper has been on in these playoff environments, which is when he's just unguardable. Like when he just has this beautiful step through into like a little hook shot almost, you're not stopping Anthony Edwards.